And if we talk about it that way, we will begin to understand what is behind some of the restrictions and experiences we have with them that makes us need to uh, create statutory law over the U.S. Constitution. Now, you have constitutional laws, but why do we need to always create statutory boundaries for them?
I'm so glad you could make it. Sit down, sit down. Oh, yeah. Oh, the band is gonna be awesome tonight. I dig it. I'm so glad you could make it.
All right, welcome back to Therapy Sessions. I'm your host, Auntie Hair Coach, and I interview everyday people telling real stories about their beauty industry journey. Today's guest is the world expert on textured hair and Afro beauty history. She's a Black hair industry heiress and activist whose father is arguably one of the most influential figures in the beauty industry. She co-hosts 2 beauty industry-specific podcasts, along with hosting Afro Hair Science Summit in Cincinnati. Cheryl Morrow, the hair oracle, has entered the chat. Welcome, and thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Hey, Tasha.
So, textured hair is probably the number one topic being discussed in the beauty industry today. So I'm really excited to be having this conversation with you. I know that I'm going to learn a lot during the conversation. Hopefully we'll dispel some myths. But before we go there, my listeners always like to know who they're dealing with. So if you would, before we get started, just kind of share some insight into who you are and what shaped you into the Cheryl Morrow we see today.
Oh my goodness. Obviously in love with my dad and his work since I've been, old enough to be hanging around and hanging out at the barbershop. And he was quite passionate. I mean, really, kind of like a nerdo, like a weird kind of Einstein kind of real mad professor. And so I fell in love with that as a kid. And so, and me and my dad, both air signs. So it was really, we were a bunch of airheads, loved science, loved talking about all that stuff. So any moment we got to talk about that when everybody else was gone, the simple people, we would just like get together and we would challenge each other. And so that is what really created just me to snowball into other things and that encouragement. And, it was just a good, a good childhood to be able, it was a perfect house for a child to be a nerd about beauty, but very strict about culture, and blackness, black people, black entrepreneur. I had a lot of reinforcement from grandparents. Yeah, they didn't play that. It was, and even if they dealt with other races of people, you had to move in a way that always served your best interests.
I love that. And neither of us has actually said your father's name yet, but he is the late great Mr. Willie Morrow. Is he a doctor? Is he a doctor of this industry?
Twice over.
Twice over, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, so Dr. Willie Morrow, I feel like that's just so, and no, I already reached out to you because, like,
Mm-hmm.
obviously we can't talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I reached out to you, I didn't even to speak with you. I don't. I know I didn't understand who I was asking to speak with at the time that I invented you to be on the podcast or invited you. And then I got to
Oh,
doing my research and was like, my mouth is hanging open. So we actually met this summer at the Bronner Brothers hair show.
mm-hmm.
You were speaking on um, a panel or a town hall,
Mm-hmm.
and we were discussing, I think the original topic was maybe about hair relaxers,
Mm,
and about the lawsuit that Benjamin Crump has brought up
yeah.
um,
Mm-hmm.
around hair relaxers. And so hair relaxers has just been so impactful on our community in so many different ways. Would
Mm-hmm.
you help to bring some clarity on the hair relaxer lawsuit? What is it? What is it about? Why should we as beauty professionals be concerned or not?
Mm-hmm.
Talk a bit about that with us, please.
I think the concern for me is um, that the propaganda around the relaxer um, lawsuit is a economic maneuver. It's a trick because the language that they're using is formaldehyde, which is a gas. Okay, that has nothing to do with us as a culture. That doesn't come from the plantation. That relaxer and depilatories, beauty products and beauty science, alchemy, all of that stuff comes from the plantation. So if you want to go after that particular market, well, then you have to go after the one that straight texture, not black people. Black people, that is not synonymous with nothing we've ever done. And see, culturally, black people think that because black people take their textured coil hair to straight, that that must mean two things. One, you're denouncing blackness. Two, you're doing something dangerous. Okay. And I think that because the conversation is so loaded without us critically unloading it,
Mhm.
it is harmful. And I guess that European capitalists understands that when a group has low to no knowledge about a subject, that is the perfect exploitation point. And so I am convinced, without a doubt, that the attorneys that are on this issue and the fundamental, I think, groundswell of natural hair care, and then I think black women as a whole, and I put in all doctors, I put them all. We have not studied it long enough for anybody to be able to make a judgment. And we are, and because you have to remember, black women's well-being is not valued enough to be able to give her the correct information so she can feel good about herself. White women or straight-haired women or European women, their health and well-being is good enough to not scare them, even though they're the ones that are being whose health is in jeopardy. Black women's health is not in jeopardy, and science supports that. But I don't know why Black women's psychological and emotional well-being is always um, subject to fright, fear, because they're trying to control your consumer buying. And I think that that is the danger and the problem I have with Attorney Benjamin Crump and his cronies.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, I mean, it feels like you answered your own question in that the reason why is because there's a lot of money in Black hair care, like
Mhm.
trillions of dollars in Black hair care. So,
Absolutely.
one thing that we know for certain is that capitalism is going to capitalize.
Mhm.
And so, in doing my research, because I'm guilty of, I saw that lawsuit and immediately thought, well, of course it's dangerous, especially after seeing the documentary Good Hair, which I believe your father was actually was in briefly with Chris Rock. And when he melted the Coke can with the relaxer, and not your father, but Chris Rock. And I just remember thinking, like, of course relaxers are bad. And so I never questioned that. And then when I saw you speak on it at Bronner Brothers earlier this year,
Mhm.
now I got to do some research, because now I'm like, well, okay, now what I thought I knew, I apparently don't know. So now I need to do some research. So to clarify, what you're saying is they're basing their their research on formaldehyde being a part of the formulation.
Mhm.
And do any relaxers contain formaldehyde? Is that a thing?
Relaxers cannot contain formaldehyde
Scientifically,
because
it's not possible.
it can't, because formaldehyde does something different
Okay.
than hydroxide does. Hydroxides are dissolvers. Formaldehyde is something that allows something to swell for it to be penetrating.
Okay.
Relaxers do the opposite. Black
Okay.
people are salt alkaline people. They're not they didn't have that ingredient at their access. You're talking about people who were in in servants. You're
Mhm.
not talking about people who started they we started with plant sciences and understood. Now, the question is, what how has black people been taught what a relaxer is? And one of the things that it is important, and the reason why we just came from Ohio, it is important for me to change that. Dr. Morrow devoted his life to going into state cosmetology boards and legislation to change, because Europeans think that the substances that black people use, because they don't think we're educated, they think that they put their definitions of chemistry onto ours. We're alkaline people. We're salt people. We're not acidic people. We don't do thio. Thio is from Europe. And so we don't it's got to be talked about, and the boogeyman has got to get out of our chemistry and alchemy and our understanding of cosmetic science versus what Europe.
Yeah.
They're not the same. And so
Yeah.
I can't really stress that enough. It's like,
Yeah.
it's
So, for the
frustrating.
babies that are listening who are maybe new to the industry or new to cosmetology in general, um, when you think about, first of all, how we're taught cosmetology, is that hair is hair.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for myself, the cosmetology school that I went to, I had one Black instructor, and she graduated cosmetology school with me and then immediately went to becoming an instructor.
Okay.
Um, all of my instructors were white. Now, I feel like the best thing that I got from it is that one of my instructors taught me that hair is a texture and not a race, and so to treat the hair as a fabric. And I feel like that's been beneficial for me as I approach it. But I didn't really have a lot of texture hair care. And so, but what I have learned and what I think I just heard you say is that Black hair care cannot be approached from the same mindset of how you treat straighter textures of hair. Is, is that what you're saying? Am I?
It's almost like this. All vegetables belong in a category of vegetables. But is broccoli a cabbage?
No.
No. Because it takes something, it takes a different kind of soil, seed, and subsequent parts. Think of it, I'm not black and you're not of African descent for any reason. You got to take in consideration Latino history. All of that is DNA. So if a scalp produces a different hair, then that must have a different set of instructions. So it must have a different set of environmental instructions. It must react different with water and air and all of the elements. Not so, but is it still keratin? Yeah. So when we say hair is hair, technically all vegetables are all vegetables. But they say green leafy ones. I mean, so the whole principle of us saying that has something to do with what we call a standard. And we know what that word standard means. It means forget the other instructions and apply this only instruction because this hair is the only one we are going to recognize as the standard. The problem with that is that it's the most recessive texture. And the most dominant texture has to become the rule. So all of the principles around it applies to all the other subsequent variations. You can't use the most recessive texture and then go back the other way because the principles stop at a point. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does make sense. It does make sense. So if I want to make, um, you know,
Your scalp
carrots
produces a different type
for
of hair.
my, huh?
I said your scalp produces a different type of hair. So you have to take in
Right.
consideration a whole bunch of other things. But those other
So,
things will eventually apply to a straight hair person. The straight hair person will not go dominant from recessive to dominant. Their principles will maybe stop at a point and then doesn't
so
apply to
then
the
it,
rest.
so then it almost makes more sense to start from educating around Afro textured hair and then work your
All the
way.
principles will make sense. And then we don't
Yeah.
have to guess. All the principles of color will make sense. All the chemistry will make sense. Everything will start rolling down and then cover the gamut. But when we turn it upside down, those principles don't work. May include maybe a wavy texture, but the principles start turning upside down once you go from recessive to dominant because then we got to start compensating. There's so many things that that straight textures just don't apply to.
Yeah. So
And so
then so then within our industry, like I said, it's such textured hair is such a topic of conversation right now. And you get online, you go to Instagram, you go to YouTube, and there's all these quote unquote textured hair experts who many of them I'm assuming are you I don't know what you're using because you can open a Milady textbook, which is again the quote unquote standard, right? And there's not really much science as it relates to textured hair. So how do we as licensed professionals especially those of us who didn't get the proper education in the first place. Excuse me, how do we differentiate between propaganda and Google and actual real science?
Cosmetology education or is training. It's not in education.
Okay.
You have to remember that.
Mhm.
The Milady, the reason because it's a book of technical prowess. It's not. It's gonna give you. It looks scholarly, and it looks like it's giving you knowledge, but it's only knowledge on a particular do and don't and how to. It's a technical um, kind of certification. It's the same thing at EMS or an ambulance or a person, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
would be doing. So the state's only interest is in making sure that you are equipped. I'm using that word for, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Equipped, meaning technically with your hands, equipped with memorization, what to do, do's and don'ts, sanitation, sanitize, that's what that training is about. When you go into more of a medical, cosmeceutical, cosmetic, dermatological, or something like that, you do have to get um, more scholastic thought process, critical thinking skills, something like that. And you have to, and then you put it into practice in residency, right? Well, there is no process of that. And so that is one of the reasons why I've devoted my career, because I had the luxury of just being able to pick and choose how I wanted to elevate, is making sure that the cosmetologist had scholastic, scholarly, as to think, prognose, diagnose, be able to think and heal and create other services within their salons, right? That will elevate their level and be able to use a little bit of dermatology, a little bit of, cosmetic, you know, chemical knowledge, and be able to prognose and partner with, so they can be able to use these things in their chair day, in their salon day, on the floor. Um, and so just remember that those two things are so different. Lady is not trying to make you a PhD or a master. That's not their point.
It's the very basics, and then it's really up to you as a stylist to continue to learn, or as a cosmetologist to
It's
continue to
called,
learn for sure.
right, and they codify it under what? Higher education.
Hmm.
They don't say
Hmm.
higher training, but cosmetology is actually training.
Okay.
It's different.
And so the difference between training and education, I'm hearing, would almost sound like I would need to go and work alongside with someone
Yeah,
who.
yeah, because it's muscle memory.
Hmm.
It's role play. That's why when you become a doctor, you have to go in there and actually do a surgery. So the your peer that you're paying all that money to get that piece of paper on your wall, because people are not interested in their undergrad or their medical school diplomas, right? They're interested in those board certifications of your peers,
Hmm.
with the association of neurosurgeons, you know what I mean, from, John Hopkins, right?
Hmm.
That's what they're interested in, making sure that, and most doctors, or specialists don't get board certifications because they're expensive. And then, two, they look good on your wall, but you were tested by your peers, people who've been in the industry for 25, 35, 40, 50 years. And so those look better than your school education. But so to answer your question, yeah, we need that role play. So they look at that person doing that surgery and they role play. so you can get the behavior, so the muscle memory in your tissue, in your brain, in the memory of how you do something, the body retains that better than, so in learning how to cut hair and what to do and what, being in the presence of James Harris is like, wow, so you begin to take on the behavior and the mores, and looking how my dad would approach something, and being there is so much more important, or more effective. You start remembering the body behaviors, and and start imitating until you get your own style, until you get your own. And I think that is so much more important, especially when you get to trichology, and you got to diagnose and scalping, because then you start looking for the style of your mentor, and you start going through the same, and then you'll eventually start copying them, and then maybe 2 or 3 years later you'll get your own style, and then you'll start doing your own thing. And unfortunately, we don't have the physical, and I think that is one of the things that we miss out on with the salon suites. They're by themselves. They have no one to mimic.
Yeah. Well, and that was actually the question that was coming up for me is, what about when I'm thinking about, you know, the Black cosmetologist in Utah or North Dakota or South
Yeah,
Dakota that doesn't have a master to go and work alongside. Clearly, infrastructure in the Black hair care industry needs, it
yeah.
leaves a lot to be
Please.
desired.
Right. And I think that, just to make your point in your question, I don't know, we've concentrated about two or three things. Black beauty supplies, we really concentrated on that 20 years ago. And then we focused on how to be $1 million salon. I think we focused on that. And then you had a whole bunch of motivators, right? And we still don't know how to do it. And I think that too, salon people have to make sure that they are attached to a healthy industry, because is the industry is fueled through the salon. We don't work like the European beauty industry. The European beauty industry is governed through the beauty supply, the retail market, the retail market of professional products. Ours is governed through the salon. Who does your hair? Who influences your choices? Who's doing what style? And I don't think I think we just focused on people and didn't focus on creating and making sure the infrastructure of the industries are still in place to make sure that the salon is healthy. Then the salon people, the cosmetologists, are healthy. So there's a pipeline of that $1 trillion that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I mean, I believe that there are, when we look at history, it's easy for me to understand why we are where we are today. And I think for me, I'm trying to figure out, okay, I understand how we got here. And so my question is, how do we fix it?
yeah. We fix the industry. You don't have to fix people. People will be able to look at, let's just say, you don't have to tell a hungry person, go in the garden and go get what you need, right? We have a garden problem. We got to fix the garden. So then we got to fix the soil. Then we got to fix the water and how it gets water. We got to fix who gonna do what at what time. So infrastructure. So in other words, for me to fix a beauty supply, you know, and this is the trouble I've always had with my peers. that their lack of critical thinking. And of course, I try not to get too, as they say, too up there, because I know I grew up in it. I get it. I totally get it. But I'm not going to tell a black person to get a black beauty supply if I don't give them something exclusively. I got to give them some exclusive so they can corner some competition and then they can dominate. I can't just give you the same thing that's in Walmart. I mean, it's crazy the way we think. And so we have to make sure that our education in textured hair is up to par. Then we got to make sure that we have black beauty schools. Then the black beauty schools got to graduate um, students who should have an automatic clientele, make sure their skills are strong. Then we should have some financial institutions if they want to have some salon businesses and beauty supply businesses. They got to go to another. Our higher education is black owned or black generated, black influenced, to where it all supports everything. We should be able to have career paths and magazines and media and chemistry and labs and fashion. We should be purveying what trends are coming out. We should not be reacting to what the public is saying. We should be the ones doing it. So it's all there. We all know
Mm-hmm.
what to do. If it was there before, we know what to go back to. I think the
Mm-hmm.
issue now it has gotten diluted because now we think that Europe has the answers, but Europe's been looking at y'all. They don't know what to do either. So now that natural hair has diluted the pot, gave away the retail market to the OTC giants like Walmart and Target, they don't know how to bring it back. And so at this point, we are in crisis management.
So at that point now, instead of being proactive, we're working from a space of being defensive.
And against impediments and forces we didn't see, because your grandmother and your mama and your daddy barber, the barbers, those people left you an industry intact. They showed you that you create movements like the first Afro movement of 1965, right? In 1970, how that movement still supported a black renaissance, regardless of how we deal with it, talking about naturalness. But that Afro movement generated what we call the cold wave curl, and
Mm-hmm.
all of it was still black. Doesn't make a
Mm-hmm.
difference of what your personal politics are. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? But
Yeah.
even in how the natural hair care, I mean the locks and weave locks, and how that supported the natural hair care movement, it didn't produce the same fruit. We're in trouble now. So
Mm-hmm.
there's something fundamentally that happened wrong, because
Yeah.
the grandbaby did the same movement and didn't get the same results. So that
Yeah.
means that either we didn't have the right information, and I blame other generations. I don't blame the generation that did it.
Mm-hmm.
I blame that maybe the Gen X one. So maybe we did not, you know, dovetail from the height of Bronner Brother, the height of Black hair, something. Maybe we didn't have enough heirs, because boy, that $1 billion boom created a lot of black children that, I mean, I basically grew up with them,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's not and I'm embarrassed to even talk about that, actually.
You're embarrassed to talk about what now?
I said I'm even
About
embarrassed to talk about, because one of the girl, I think it was at some college campus. I forget which one, but she stood up and she said, we talk about generational wealth and we talk about this. She said, what happened to you guys? Because you're talking about the richest renaissance in the history of Black American presence in the Western world, and we talk about the generational wealth, and we talk about it. Where did you guys go? And I couldn't answer her. I mean, because obviously I was there,
Mhm.
and most of those, because my father was a junior compared to John Johnson, George Johnson, Eunice Johnson, the Bronner brothers. Those were, and Mr. Dudley and Mr. Morrow was the same age. So there's a lot of distance between S.B. Fuller, or the Annie Malone, and Madam C.J. Walker obviously died so young. But the point of the matter, that era um, produced heirs,
Mm.
but they didn't. So it's kind of embarrassing. Like it's almost like we took the money and then just went off, poof, didn't look behind them, didn't make sure that we understood things. So that's what I
Yeah,
mean by that. Yeah.
yeah. I have some ideas about that, but I don't want to talk about that on this platform. I'll talk to you on the other line about where I would like to have that discussion. Okay, so I'm not switching gears as much as I just maybe want to help to provide more context
Mm-hmm.
about where we are right now. So we said that your father was, I'm going to call him Dr. Willie Morrow because
Yep.
that's what my
Absolutely.
research showed me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, your father is credited with the Afro pick
Mm-hmm.
and the Tomorrow curl, which then turned into it's now called the California curl, which
Mm-hmm.
provided the technology for the Jerry curl. And then I found that he might have also invented the comb attachment for the blow dryer.
Mm-hmm.
And the more research I did, I realized that he actually holds more patents and product formulations and inventions in this industry than any hairstylist ever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I just can't even, like, the privilege of being able to sit at his feet
Mm-hmm.
as, I mean, he's a scientist, um,
At
and
the
an
end of the day.
inventor and an innovator.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, and I know you shared that you guys like to nerd out together, but so did you always want to be a hairstylist? You are a licensed cosmetologist, yes?
Yes. And a
Okay,
barber, cosmetic
okay,
trichologist. Mm-hmm.
okay. Did you always
I
want to go into hair?
no. My father was preparing me to be an astronomer.
Okay. Why an astronomer?
Um, there was always a thing in my household about my mother telling me to stop looking up, right?
Mm,
Watch where you're going, like, psh, 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 you know. And I was fascinated. And so I remember my parents, all I wanted was, I had about five, and I'm talking about very expensive telescopes that they would buy. I mean, this, you know what I mean? And they wouldn't buy no, like, the little kid ones, right? I had some really nice telescopes, and I would sit it out on my mother's deck, and that's what my father was preparing me for. And I thought that
okay.
that's where I was going. And then I had to get a little serious, right? So in my junior year, I think I went telecommunications, media, right? And my father asked me, um, uh, how do they make money? People in telecommunications, how do y'all make money? And then
Mhm.
I guess I didn't answer him fast enough. He said, scratch that. You're going to beauty school.
Oh, So
That's
you
how
were
I got there.
told what you were going to do.
My father did not allow us to decide.
Okay.
He because when you say, "Oh, what would my mom do? What would my dad do?" He believed in teaching you so you can remember. So he led. No, he directed his
Okay.
children. He did not give them a choice. No.
Okay. And you have you had two siblings, yeah, a sister and a
Yes.
brother.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I know I came across that your brother is no longer
Hmm.
with us. Okay.
And my
Were
little
they
sister.
yours? I'm sorry.
My brother was a cosmetologist and a barber. My little sister's
Okay.
not though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But my brother used it, to kind of, he was real pimp game with it. You know what I mean? It had a purpose. It wasn't to do hair. It
Okay.
was I don't even think that he was very good at it, to be honest. I
Okay.
don't I that was not what his goal. He was told he was going.
Okay.
Father made sure that we were going, and we went and we graduated, and we always had to graduate 2 or 3 months before. My father was not having you
Hmm.
graduating at the same time as everybody else, because he felt that your last name is Morrow. You should be doing something else. So, but I
Yeah.
don't think my brother was any good. I actually, well, no, he wasn't good at all. But he used it.
Hmm.
He knew he wasn't going to be making no money.
Okay.
He used it for the ladies and the gentlemen's, and like, he was going to give them an ad. He was more of the take over the business CEO kind of guy. He wasn't
Okay.
interested. He wanted to use the chair as a public relations tool.
Yeah. So he was an influencer before influencers were a thing.
I mean, yeah. My brother would bring his chimpanzee along just to pass the carpool lane.
Like a real chimpanzee, like
I
Michael Jackson.
Yes, yes, way before. Absolutely. I mean, it's legendary. It's stories about that in San Diego.
My goodness. Okay. All right. So you get licensed, and then do you go and work in a salon, or do you go and work for dad, or what does that look like as an heiress graduating from cosmetology and barbering school?
It's to be expected. It ain't no
Hmm.
celebration. Mr. Morrow didn't play that. That's what you supposed. I mean, it was like it was like
Yeah.
what, like, duh. And I
Yeah.
remember my counselor, Tasha. I remember it's like it was yesterday. I remember my high school counselor say, "Okay, all right, you're graduating. Your high school counselor always tries to get your plan and what you're doing
Mhm.
and blah 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 blah." And I remember Miss Osborne. I just her name, and I tell this story because she asked me, what was I going to do? What's your plan? Are you going to Loma Linda? Are you going? Where are you going? I looked at her and I said, what am I going to be doing? Like, and I said this to her. I said, would you ask me that if my last name was Kennedy?
Mm. Good
No,
for
you
you.
wouldn't. And
Yeah.
so that is had a complete wonderful experience. But no, I went to go work for the Willie Morrow. I had a station with a bow on it. I mean, I was supposed to get in there, and whew, my dad cracked my head open, boy. I tell you, he was. And also, they were seasoned. I went into a salon, a Willie Morrow salon, right there in his whole building, um, with seasoned hairstylists. So they did not go light on me at all. I was supposed to get in, and I was not in charge. They didn't give a damn about me being Mr. Morrow's daughter. Now, I was watched. I was
Hmm.
taken care of. But Tommy, Deborah, Yvonne, Toy, Frankie. I remember all their names. They was
Yes.
grown. They was
Hmm.
grown. So even when we went on tour or Mr. Morrow, I was watched.
Hmm. Hmm.
I could have some fun if I was old enough to get into the club. Boy, man, those some good years, man. I was, I you know, maybe about 18, and and Tommy and all of them. And of course, my brother was 4 years older than me. I tagged along as long as my little underage ass was sitting in that corner. I
Hmm.
could come in and hang out with the grown people, but
But you got to
that's
chill.
yeah. Oh yeah, I had
Don't
to
get in
sit.
here doing too much.
Absolutely. And so I had a ball. But that's the
Yeah.
salon I went to work in. Yeah.
Okay. And then at some point, you ended up moving to Manhattan. How's
All 19 years. Harlem,
mm,
USA. Yes.
what
Yes.
was
Yes.
that
Yes.
about? Were you there doing
Uh,
hair?
that was about growing up.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
just wanted to take a bite. And I knew I needed a different set of experiences. No one I mean, I don't even know. Tasha, I don't even know what that's about. I don't even remember it. It could have been a relationship. It could have been, but I instinctively knew I should go.
Mm,
And to add another experience to the moral kind of experience instead of, I just wanted to grow up. And, but that decision, my father also knew that it was part of the story. So even though he didn't voice it, and because he couldn't, because my mother was having a conniption, so he had to take care of her. You know what I mean, and her
mhm,
emotions around it.
mhm,
But he could really get into it as if to say, also let me utilize her while she's there. It's part of a story. So he was supportive, but I just wanted to grow up, and oof. So that began my relationship with my mentors and even though I knew these people and knew the process of understanding the peers of my father
mhm,
and meeting them, but that I needed to attach myself to two people, and that was the great Rudy Townsend um, and James Harris.
okay. So you were
So,
still doing hair when you were in New York.
oh yeah. Well, it fluctuated because then I
Okay.
went to use my knowledge and I went to work for the internal movement, moving all of the Bank of New York's money to the Federal Reserve. I did that. Um, but I always did the hair of all the people at the bank. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
and,
Yeah.
and yeah, but I had an advantage. And moving from Brooklyn, I didn't even have a coat. I don't even know. All I know is that I saw those big white flakes, man, drop down, and I was looking at them. And I remember I was on Chambers Street at 8 o'clock at night, no coat because I was coming from California.
San Diego
And
girl.
right. And but I wanted to go from there. I went from Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, World Trade to Bushwick, Brooklyn. That was
I
when
love
Biggie
Bushwick.
and Diddy and all of them were huge. Mary J. Blige came to that salon. Everybody, and I went in that salon, and that was it was great money. It was probably the most money I made in the New York process. But I went from there to back to Manhattan until and then Salon Row, which is in right across from Carnegie Hall in Manhattan, 57th Street, all the expensive salons. So I went from the grunge, and that was an interesting experience because it was in the namesake of Naomi Sims, which is the great um, fashion model, and it was black owned, owned by an African family from Senegal,
Mm.
and they were the investors in the Naomi Sims brand. And that's when I really understood my father's brand and to go into brand salons in the namesake of African descending people, historic, famous people, because that's what the white salons were doing. Frederick Fakai, um, Lapine, Bumble and Bumble at that time, and Elizabeth Arden had the spot. They all had great names, right? And that is, I think, the future of salon work. And so that's how I ended up in New York.
I got you.
Mhm.
And so you just kind of hit on something that, again, when I began doing hair 28 years ago, it was not something that was being discussed, but something
Mm,
that it seems like you came to understand during your time in New York
mm,
is branding.
right.
Um, like, and it's easy for me to understand now that I understand that branding is important. It's easy for me to understand why it's important.
Yeah.
Um, so when you think about your father's legacy and your legacy in this beauty industry, and you think about your branding, how are you translating your father's work
Mhm,
and translating and branding that for the next generation of hairstylists?
mhm. I think that too, just because Mr. Morrow, my dad, people always tease me, you call your dad Mr. Morrow? And I had to, because, I couldn't be saying, Dad, Dad, at the office. um, just because you do a lot doesn't mean you should. And one of the weird things about my experience with him and around the industry is that sometimes you have too many choices and too many avenues, too many options, too many inroads, right? And I find myself at the precipice now. What would this whole world, as it funnels in, what single thing would it be, right? And it can have subsequent parts, right? Um, it's a good question. Um, Education, knowledge. If I remember your question, because I went someplace else with it, but reiterate your question.
So my question was, branding has become such a
Yes.
focal point of the beauty industry today, and
Mm-hmm.
translating, because you're kind of that in between generation between your father's generation and
Mm-hmm.
our children and grandchildren's generation of the beauty industry. How are you translating, in terms of branding between your father and our grandchildren?
Right. Three components: making
Okay.
sure that I preserve. I don't leave anything out, and I preserved his legacy pretty well. Photographs, documentation, formulation, patents, designs, trademarks, and things of that nature to make sure that's there. Two, his greatest love was 400 Years Without a Comb, the book, and all of the subsequent content, and then, of course, the artifacts, right? Would like to make sure that that travels, because the most important story in the Black American experience in all 404 years, because we keep saying 400, it's 404, baby. You know what I mean? And so, in the 4 years after our 400 is in, actually the last 300 and maybe 60 years or 380 years, because we got 24 years in the 21st century. And this is very important because we're 21st century people. We're living in the 21st century. We cannot use 20th century nothing. Okay, and I want to be very clear that it don't work. Whatever did not work in the 20th, 19th, 18th, and 17th, 16th century, leave it alone. It didn't work. And so branding for me is to make sure that I create a encased good heirloom for you guys, heirloom, war chest, and that those things are preserved as I put my own personality in the 21st century and how, because when people inherit something, like you think about Donatella Versace, what are you going to do? Your brother did this. And so you have to preserve it, whatever's there now, right? And then you got to put your spin on it. And so, you know, education and the preservation of it, because I know that we don't have a lot of muscle memory. We don't have a lot of momentum in practice on generational wealth, because generational wealth, it takes heirs, and then you have to give heirs inheritance. So I can't be busy trying to reinvent the wheel, Tasha, because I'm going to leave something. I have to, and people say, well, then, you're not going to do your vision. First of all, heirs don't hustle. I don't have to rethink. Black folks are not rethink. See, that's the issue. You cannot create generational anything if you keep starting over every 25 years. And the natural hair care world started over. They did not have to. And so when you start over, you leave the information. You leave the clues. You leave the map. You leave the road. You leave the assets. You leave the momentum already. It's already a snowball. And so what you do is bite off a little pebble because you want to have an identity, and then you go working against what? The universal law of what? Of compensation, correspondence. You say you don't have no law behind you. The laws of the universe is an inheritance law, energy. It doesn't mean for you to start all over. You're not an individual unto yourself. And so that is education, and making sure that his books and his intellectual property and all of that is preserved. His artifacts, the 40 years without a comb museum can travel, and then my spin on all of those subsequent things. If now, and me coming out with what I would probably want him to do if he was here, if he would ask me. So I don't have anyone to ask now, so I gotta do it. And what would a 21st century California curl look like? And that is what I have to concentrate on, because Black folks, you ain't gotta pick cotton. Your ancestors did that better than you could ever do it. The only thing you got to pick is your afro. You know what I mean? You ain't got to do
Absolutely.
nothing. Your ancestors are waiting for you to take your place. You are not a guest here.
Mhm.
And so that is, so in other words, and if I were to take a off beaten path, Tasha,
Mhm.
I would want to
Yeah.
teach my young Black, wonderful, genius, brilliant of a people how to be heirs. You never were a hustler. You came to the Western world because somebody was hustling you.
Mm.
You didn't come here to be a hustler. You came here to
Mhm.
be exploited. So that is a different energy. But if to get the energy of heiress, that to understand I am from and connected to something that I don't have to prove, I don't have to buy anything, I don't have to substantiate. I don't have to do that. And so that is, I know that was a long answer, but
No, 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 no. That was everything. That was everything. And what I was thinking as you were sharing that is it became so clear to me why this industry, again, just based on history, why it would be important to have like the relaxer lawsuit or the Crown Act, which I want to talk with you about. But it explains why, just like in other areas of history, why they want to make it illegal to talk about the history. They want to change the history. They want to rework the history because if we're not grounded in it, then we
mm-hmm,
can't stand on it and use that to propel ourselves forward. That forces you to start back over from scratch again.
mm-hmm.
Um,
They
so,
want you to have morals about
mhm,
relaxers. Morals
mm,
is cosmetic. We are a
mhm,
cosmetic people. We do all
mhm,
kind of things. We dye. We dye hair. We've been doing it for tens of thousands. We don't need to have a moral compass. Now you're gonna come and try to scare us with something that has nothing to do with us. So no, what you're doing is that you want us to leave our market.
mhm.
That's what you want to do.
That's it.
Then all of a sudden, when you pick it up, and then it's going to be a press release.
Oh,
Oh, we
look.
found out that it doesn't.
Mhm,
Come on now,
mhm.
come on, black folks. We ain't fell for that one.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. I want to be respectful of your time, and also I still have questions.
No, I'm
Because
good.
we have
Let's
not.
do it.
I'm sorry.
I said, well, I'm good. Let's do it.
Awesome. Because I wanted to touch on the Crown Act with you.
Mm-hmm,
Again, this is a conversation that's being had nationwide. We're seeing
mm-hmm,
every other day some child is being held back, based on some rules about their hair. And I've never known, literally, for any other race of people to have laws written on the books in relation to their appearance. And maybe
mm-hmm.
I'm wrong, but I just don't know for that to be a thing.
Right.
Um, you've been really vocal um, on the issue that Black Americans are approaching Afrophobia from the perspective of hair discrimination and that that's a misguided approach.
Mm-hmm,
Um, tell us what we're doing wrong and how do we approach this so that we can get on the right track. And I know it's tied somehow into not reinventing the wheel, um,
mm-hmm,
but help me connect these dots.
mm-hmm. Um, African American studies professors, politicians, um, and have not and CEOs of corporations, um, beauty schools, cosmetologists, bureaus, and bureaucracy, and boards of education have not asked you or I anything. That's number one. They have not engaged the black hair care industry at all. And it's fascinating that, and I'm going to say it this way because I'm going to be me, the audacity that influencers, professors, politicians, corporate heads um, would have the audacity and the nerve and the gall to think that they are qualified to even approach it is mind blowing to me. And that must mean that two things: their huge disrespect for every contributor in black hair care, every black builder, and their lack, gross lack of preparedness and knowledge and education on the subject matter. Their disrespect and their gross lack of knowledge on the subject matter. Don't, because people ask questions when they're interested. And they did not knock on the cosmetology and cosmetologist's door. So that must mean they don't give a damn. They are going to make it up as they go. They're going to go back into the old books. And when you go into books, you're still going into the collegiate, if a PhD kind of, you're still going in there with that Google shit. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So my whole point is that kind of thought process produced the laws and the bills we have. And ironically, it doesn't work. And what happens is that wonderful professionals who are devoted like you, Tasha, have to get the fallout. You get the customers in your chair, and you get all the chitty chatter, and you have to sit by and look at the lowest inaccurate, disrespectful information in the history of Black haircut. You got to sit there and watch it on YouTube, because it comes from that same notion that hair is hair, or it doesn't deserve any higher approach or critical thinking. It has no scholar to it, and high art and métier. It doesn't have any of that prestige. And so it generates laws, bills proposed, and generates that low level crap, soft, wet, and pink legislation we have. And so, and I know I stretched it out there, but I am really pissed, because when I see my little prince down in Texas, I'm pissed, because you wasted a lot of time and wasted a lot of people's money, and you wasted a lot of taxpayer money to come out with a bill that doesn't work, to the point where they white folks are throwing that shit in your face, and that baby can't still go to school. Man, Tasha, please.
Yeah.
Now, how? I know you asked that question. I got to take a deep breath, because I had to, you know what I mean? Woo. Because I want to get them all in one room and close the door and give them a word whooping. And next time, if you don't know, ask.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but one thing, we got to figure out what is the impediment as a cosmetology industry. The impediment is the dress code, not the afrophobia that creates discrimination, because it's not the discrimination. That's a whole nother issue. It's the dress code that these learning institutions and employers are hiding under, because the highest court in the land, SCOTUS, has upheld dress codes as above the First Amendment. Put it that way.
Yeah. My thing is, I don't understand. I do understand why we need a law. I understand where I live and the history of where I live, and I understand that. But I have the right to exist because I exist. And what grows out of my head should not, why is it being legislated? Why can't I just exist? If you leave me the hell alone and allow me to exist.
Well, first of all, that's not what's happening. They're not discriminating. Okay. They're not.
And which is what you just said, but I'm just, okay.
Right. They're not discriminating. Hair discrimination is not what's going on. They're not telling you to not come to work with no hair.
Okay.
Hair discrimination, it would be hair discrimination. They would be telling you to remove it.
Okay.
Don't come with hair.
Yeah.
So hair discrimination is a bad word.
Okay.
Okay.
So
All right.
what is happening?
Okay. Now, what they are doing
Mhm.
is that they have a history in this country of what we call afrophobia. Okay. Now, they are image discriminating because they want you to change your image. So
Mhm.
the white population does not get triggered.
Mhm.
Now, but because as cosmetologists, as I do with my students, I must make them understand fashion, history, image, hygiene, history, so you can understand the mind that you're dealing with that created the barriers in the first place. Because you were already wearing these hairstyles when you were a servant. So they're not discriminating in mind and care that you wear these types of hairstyles because they've been worn before.
Yeah.
Certain institutions and the law as the U.S. Supreme Court protects dress code. What is it called? A CODE. Why is it a code?
Mm.
Because it's locking in an image that they want everyone to, because it says something. This is how we want you to look, because we can't look like you, so we want you to look like us.
Mm.
That's what a code is about.
Mhm.
They're taking something from you.
Mhm.
And so when they image discriminate, what they're saying is you have to adjust to our image requirements. Usually those requirements don't look like you or makes your biology harder to meet the standard. They don't care. They said meet the standard, meet the standard, meet the standard. Now,
Mhm.
who runs the standard? It is an image. Now, who wears khakis in a school uniform, right?
Mhm.
Who wears khakis? Ivy League white boys. Who wears polo shirts? Why does the uniform keep looking like something that does not represent the 360? They don't
Mm.
care, because what they're saying is that we rule the laws, we rule the environment, we rule the land, we want you to look like this is a what? White Anglo-Saxon Protestant what? Country. We don't want other images, and then of course language it, and that they want it to stay. That's what you're
Mhm.
dealing with.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay? Not stop saying it's racism. They over there doing your look, your booty, your lips. They over there doing you. They
Mhm.
don't want you to do you. That's what an egotistical, narcissist, basis fundamental rulership is about. We want to look like we want to look like you. We don't want you to look like you. We want you to look like us. And in Afrophobia, I teach environmental triggers are heavily psychologically loaded with all kind of inner talk that you guys have no idea what European Americans are saying to themselves. And until white people or European people get in a room and tell us, and Tasha says, when you see me, tell me what you're feeling. Until you answer and they can express what they feel when they touch your hair, look at your nose, look at your face, tell them to tell you what they're feeling. And
Is it
nine times out,
realistic to expect them to give an honest answer?
not at first, because
Okay.
black people keep getting into the fact that we got so much momentum on us processing their reaction. Black people have owned the solution to racism and we didn't even invent it. And that's the dangers of institutions taking over our thought process. Leaders, community leaders. No. And one of the women asked me, well, what do you think we should do about the racism? Shit, I don't know. Don't ask me. I didn't invent it. I don't know. You ask the person who invented it. What you gonna do about
Yeah.
some shit you invented? You
Yeah.
know, that's the 21st century way we need to talk about. We need to say, come on over here, Miss Ann. Come here.
Mhm.
What is it about me that makes you feel? I want to know what you're feeling because I already know what your behavior. Baby, they would just look at you like, oh, I've never been asked that before. We want to know because your reactions are killing us.
Mhm.
Your reactions are making life difficult for us.
Mhm.
Your triggers and things are creating the weirdest energies on the planet. We want to know when you touch my hair or what makes you want to touch it. Because I never even imagined never wanting to touch yours.
Yeah.
Like, and if we talk about it that way, we will begin to understand what is behind some of the restrictions and experiences we have with them that makes us need to uh, create statutory law over
Mhm.
the U.S. Constitution. Now you have constitutional laws, but why do we need to always create statutory boundaries for them? And that is what makes us have crown acts and things. And then, of course, they don't work because we really think it's about us. No, it's about dress codes. And they come
Yeah.
out of colonial America.
Wow. Okay.
And,
Thank you for that
and
insight.
that's a lot, right. That's a lot to unpack because
It
that
is.
means that we need to go back in Black American history of this
Mhm.
country and we can understand, we can find it. And then Tasha go, okay, we was on some other craziness. Forget all of that. We
Yeah.
got a problem with coding,
Yeah.
dress code,
Yeah.
black code.
No, it makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
It makes
And
perfect
once
sense.
we tear down those, then what
Mhm.
would we need with a Crown Act? Because
Yeah.
in fact, the U.S. military said, "Oh, we ain't got no discrimination. We need some black folks in this military. Tear that shit down." See, they do it when there's a payoff. White folks ain't crazy. They
Mm-hmm.
do it when there's a payoff.
Mm-hmm.
They
And
get it.
actually, one of the questions that I had for you, because I know that um, Mr. Morrow was hired at one point by the Department of Defense
Mm-hmm.
to teach Black hair in the military. And I'm reading this and I'm like, and especially during that time,
Yeah.
why would the government hire a Black man to come and teach Black hair in the military? And I'm like, it had to have been money. I can't.
No, actually, the U.S. Armed Forces and the Pentagon. Just think, Tasha, how progressive they were at that time.
Mhm.
But they had a follow the money, like you said. But they had a reason. They said, "Okay, wait a minute, guys. Sometimes discrimination don't make sense, literally." And so when white society says, "Okay, our laws are stupid right here. Stop that. It's dumb. We've got to let black people be black people because at the end of the day, fighting, military, soldiers, warriors, all of that is a brethren. And if these people can't bring their whole selves, there can't be no brethren. The Afro, it created a national security. That our national security was at stake. And the Afro became a foreign policy. Nah, shit, we gotta get them in there with they froze. They gotta look good. This soldier is wired different. And so then Beth Bailey, the professor, the fabulous European sister of ours, Beth Bailey, she said that the military embraced the Afro, and the Afro actually dissolved the draft. There was no draft after the implement, and Mr. Morrow won the contract not because he was a better barber with the technical gifted hands. No, yeah. They trusted his knowledge of black skin and black scalp and black hair. So he wrote a lot of books during his tour. He didn't just go in there and just no. They had curriculums, they had magazines, they had commissary and products and Afro shit and everything, which led into the relationships of why I have so many pictures, because John Johnson was like, brother, damn, you hooking it up. And so they flew him to Chicago and said, could you take our stuff too? Mr. Morrow, because those men were older, George and John were older. He said, yes, sir, yes, sir. Here we go again. And so when a top tier black people telling you what to do, and then you help, and so you had Johnson, and he said, what I'll do, I'll send George down there and take care of your family while you're overseas. That's how I met Eunice Johnson and all of that. That became my godmother because Mr. Morrow was gone. Then John Johnson sent his photographer to follow Mr. Morrow, and that got the military clearance. And so that's why I got all those pictures, because of John, the Johnson family. And so that is, man, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, just so many pictures come in my mind sometimes. It just remembering that. But the military was so progressive.
Okay.
And in other words, and like Beth Bailey proposes the question, we don't need a statutory law, guys who created the Crown Act. We just need to go back in history and say, if the greatest military force, industrial complex can change, schools can, employers can, and cosmetologists, which is another job, can go into these DEI and HR departments and create a better path to their employees being able. And so I rewrote the Crown Act. It's called Crowned, not Crown Act, Crowned, which means it happened already. You know what I mean? But I put in some elements so we can get over. And all I added was a while at work and while at school. And a cosmetic gateway into meeting the standards of the dress codes. But you can't tell me to meet your dress code permanently, even if I leave campus or I leave the job. Can't tell me to cut it. And so there's a biological thing that you're telling me to do. And so we can get there. But I did it because I know the impediment. I don't get into race and start crying and getting all sweaty and getting all excited about some shit that ain't there. I don't give a shit if they respect protective hairstyles. I'm not going to create something called a protective hairstyle because they shouldn't care. They shouldn't even be getting into all of that.
It's not their business, right?
What is the impediment? Mm-hmm. We should be so much 20th century and so much far along, in my opinion.
No, you definitely brought all of that. You connected some dots. You brought it back for me. And that while at home or while at work and while at school, like that's it right there. But you don't have any control over what I do when I'm not here. I understand that when we're at work, um, there are
Well, because me and
standards when you're at work, and
yeah,
standards
because
are
me
important. But
absolutely.
yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I want to ask you because we've talked so much about so many different things, and in terms of your legacy and your father's legacy. Your father's been, I mean, from what I can tell, he's when you talk about somebody pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, and I hate that terminology, but I'm going to use it here. Your father's been the definition of that. He
Absolutely.
grew from poverty to a business where he employed at least at one point over 200 people. And correct me if I'm saying anything wrong here. Have
Absolutely.
you ever felt overshadowed by or pressured to live up to your father's legacy? And do you ever suffer from imposter syndrome?
Hmm. Ooh, I didn't expect that question. I'm going to answer you like this.
Okay.
That would have been a good question for my brother.
Mm.
And this is one of the things about my course in heirs. Don't hustle. I want to say to anyone who would be listening to this, and this would be one of those question answers about, let's lock the door. Let's lock black folks, lock the door. Don't let no This is a private conversation, just to us's, okay? Fathers have a different succession predecessor energy with their girl children that they don't have with their boy children. Boy children, or maybe just by virtue of being male, have a natural competition or something. There's another something on that is not with girls. Then I looked like my dad.
Just like him.
And then I inherited his, I inherited the intel. It had nothing to do with the possessions. I inherited the passion. So, with that being said, no, I am literally a junior. I mean, yeah, it's bad. Okay,
Yes. Well, y'all,
so
you are your daddy's twin for sure.
right in every sense. So I don't have to act like.
Yeah.
Maybe that would have been my brother. I probably I did I don't yeah I don't yeah there's no imposter. It's almost like there is like a twin.
Hmm.
So I am much more of a and I want to say something to you also. And because we don't study our plantation eras, and we don't really get into the genius of what we did on the plantation. Black people don't talk about the plantation. And I talk about it because that was our first Timbuktus in the Western world. And there were so many of the Timbuktus. Let me just say this, and reparations is only solely based on labor. They don't understand that the plantation was an institution for white folks. It was the Timbuktus. Okay. So I think we should go after the consulting fees. Give them the labor. Stop talking about that labor. Money gone, baby. Okay. That's just the least we did. But what we imparted. And the reason why I just wanted to go back and hit something, because I wanted to say something to you. I wish that we could really change our perspective, because Europe was poverty. If you are the very thing that somebody needed to generate their wealth, there's no way you could be impoverished. If you can't use yourself to build the world you want, that's poverty. And I want black people to take that out of their lexicon. Unfortunately, just say that you had no power.
Mm.
You had no power because you were forced. You lived with under barbaric, inhumane, insane, neurotic conditions. Just say that. But there was nothing about your existence that's poverty stricken. You're poverty stricken. You
Mhm.
may have you live amongst impoverished people. You didn't learn. You learned that shit. You didn't
Mhm.
come with that. Okay. And I just wanted to make sure. But Mr. Morrow, man, would blow those minds, those generals and that top military brass. He would blow their mind. That. And see, no, I pulled your ass up by my bootstrap.
Mm.
See, language, it makes a difference.
Yes.
It feels different in your chest. Say
Yes.
that. No, I'm
Yes.
asking you. Say that. No, I pulled you up
I pulled
by my
you up.
bootstrap.
And I know that because that's the thing is like Africa is always portrayed as being this poor, destitute country. And I'm like, well, then why don't y'all stay your asses out of it then? If it's so poor and
Well,
destitute and there's nothing of use there. So I know
so
that. And also, I hear your point about language. Yeah.
mhm. And I need to stop telling you, as another black person, I need to stop saying dumb things. And that's that 21st century blackness that we need to have. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm about to give white folks a heart attack. Because the moment I tell them that racism doesn't exist, they're gonna have a heart attack. Oh, wait.
What?
And you're gonna find out how attached they are to you being attached to it.
Mm.
Because
Mm.
if because then they'll say, well, what are you doing? What are you talking about? Oh my God, there's no, especially Democrats. There's no racism. What are you talking about? And you tell them, no, there's only me and you,
Mm.
and we know what's behind that. You don't. It ain't about no hate me. It ain't no dislike me. It ain't no. You want and always wanted what I had, and I don't have any power to get it back. That's all that's going on here. It's capitalism.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you want me to get all souped up that it's over here. No, it ain't over there. It's
Yeah.
right here. And I
Yes.
think 21st century and language is, you know, because it language is sound, and sound is the first force in the universe. Sound is vibration. So the power of the words are extremely, and if you just say it different, you may get
Mm-hmm.
somebody with a deer in the headlights, but it'll go in there different.
Mm-hmm. They're gonna be thinking about it later. I could literally talk to you all day, but I do have to start winding down. So I
Yes.
want to get to this. So we're well past the point, but we're gonna go here anyway. I call it
Okay.
story time with Auntie Hair Coach, and that
Oh
is
boy.
where I give you some. I give you. So I've got here. I've got 4 prompts here. You can
Mm-hmm.
choose to answer all of them if you would like, but I want
Mm-hmm.
you to choose at least one and give us a story.
Oh, okay.
You ready for your prompts?
Yes.
All right. So the first one is tell us your favorite song lyric and why.
Favorite
The second
song.
one is one thing you would change about the beauty industry. I have you ever wanted to quit the beauty industry?
Mhm.
And finally, a scenario where you were wrong and had to course correct. You can do
Ooh.
one or all four, up to you.
Let's do all four real quick.
Let's go.
Let's do
What's
it.
your favorite song lyric and why?
Young, gifted, and black.
Yes. Come on, Nina. I feel like
Uh,
what, and you know what? I'm I'm gonna let you explain if you would like to, but also what's understood doesn't need to be explained. So I'm gonna let you go with why if you want to.
because I also was very young, gifted, and black, and I think that that is the ultimate covenant, the ark of the covenant for us. That will always let us allow us to know who we are and where we are. And it also allows us to look back. And if everybody has to look at the younger gen, so everybody's always looking back. And that's all we need, baby. We
Okay.
need, Dr. Claude Anderson would say. He said to Moses, you know, put your hand in your chest and take it out.
Mm,
Then he was black. Then he said, well, put it back, put it back in. And then he had the leprosy. And he said, well, put it back in. Made him black again. That's all you need.
yeah.
And it's that genius. It's not just the color. It's genius, the brilliance.
Yes. Yes. And she's dropping gems in here, y'all. If you don't know who Dr. Claude Anderson is, please look that up. You need to know this. All right. The
Yeah,
next one is one thing you would change about the beauty industry.
I believe that we need to take a more of a leadership role. Um, the barbering and cosmetology was one of the financial banks and institutions that bankrolled um, Black America. And I think that we need to be a lot more bolder, a lot more aggressive
Mm,
and progressive.
agreed. Have you ever wanted to quit the beauty industry?
I did.
You did quit the beauty
However,
industry.
I didn't quit.
Okay.
It
But you
was
wanted to.
a it was an abyss of an adjustment
Okay.
because you get off focus because the beauty industry is so many things than a chair in a salon and going to work. The moment cosmetology turned into a blue collar labor field, that was the decline. It changed from a
Mm,
career to a labor force. And that's what I am devoted to changing it back to a 360-degree career. And Mr. Morrow's is usually that prime example of the councilmate career. The technician,
mhm.
the expert, the author, the designer, the science, the builder, the educator, the inventor, all of the 360-degree salon owner. I mean, it's all in
Consultant.
there.
Hmm.
Right. And so that circle. And so I did a comic book actor actually that I take to Comic Cons and all the Black Comic Days of Mr. Morrow's life. And
I love that.
yeah, it's a comic book, and it was a graphic novel. And
Okay.
his principles. So it's like Grandmaster, 360 degrees of nine laws, right?
Yeah.
And it's in a comic book form.
Okay.
So if I answered that.
Yeah. Yeah. A scenario where you were wrong and had to course correct.
Hmm. Where I was wrong. I think I think I'm in the middle of doing that actually. Um, it is my frustration um, with the natural hair care movement, and I think I want to course correct that.
Mm,
I don't think they know. They didn't know. They did not know that they gave away literally probably the greatest transfer of black wealth in the history of all 400 years. They did it within 23 years.
Mhm.
And I don't think they really understand that. And I'm course correcting because I'm dealing with the lack of the knowledge. But obviously, I missed something, and I am totally taking responsibility because I know,
Mm.
and I didn't spend those early years. Um, and that's one of my biggest regrets. And
Mm.
so I'm course correcting. I got that wrong. I thought it was all this education. It was about education, and George Floyd didn't help it.
Mm.
And
Devastating. And if I'm not mistaken, what is today's date? Yesterday was the anniversary of,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah, absolutely. The shock
yeah.
of and I think that particular movement uh really helped dismantle um black wealth at that
Mm.
point. Because see, we don't understand, if my bootstrap pick your ass up, right? Then you must know that if white America about to help you do something, just know your ass is about to lose whatever it is that they helping you do. It's almost like, when they name a black person the head of housing, just know you about to be homeless. Just know that when they
Yeah.
make a black person head of the food drug administration, just know you about to be something's about to be taken away from you because it's a sleight of hand. And so, yeah, that's my biggest regret. And I'm in the middle of course correcting, doing podcasting, just trying to allow them to understand the aha moment. We got to
Mm.
get this. We just got to get it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tasha, for that.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining me. And like I said, I knew that I would learn a lot. I have so many notes here, and I don't think I've said this out loud, but I'm going to say this to you now: is that I have adopted you as an auntie and a mentor. So you already told me I could call you.
Come on.
So now I'm gonna be calling now.
Well, I tell you
um,
what. I remember I had some tough ones because I know iron sharpens iron, and we only have a few moments together in this life, and life is short. So I'm tough. I'm always gonna ask you a question. People always say, "Oh, Cheryl ask us a question." It's almost like she already know the answer. She just waiting for us to,
mhm,
or for me to crack you on top of the head.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah,
No, you ask
but no.
very uncomfortable questions, but I'm turning 50 this year. I'm in my uncomfortable era. I would like to be uncomfortable. You know, so I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
Oh, good.
I like talking to someone who makes me think about why. Why are you doing that? Why do you think that? I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I'm so thankful for you for sharing your time with me. Um, how can my listeners follow your movement?
Hey, log on to the podcast. You can look me up at Facebook. You know what I mean?
What's the name of the
And
podcast?
Instagram is Afro Hair Science.
Okay.
Okay, Afro Hair Science. And my page is obviously in my name, Cheryl Morrow. And it's
Okay.
always posted there 3 times a week. I love to get your feedback. Uh,
Hmm.
Auntie Hair Coach. Hopefully, we
Hmm.
can do something together with the hair coaching thing.
Yeah.
Love that, and let's just work together
Yes.
and let's correspond.
Yes.
And share ideas.
Sit down, sit down. Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you could make it.
Next time on Therapy Sessions with Auntie Hair Coach.
If I could give any advice to anyone who's like, I'm learning and, I want to know more about identity politics, I would say, like, sit with those hard conversations that make you uncomfortable. I have them all the time. There's stuff that I still have to check myself with, like where I'm learning things too. Like, none of us are free from fucking white supremacy in the existence of the world. Like, I'm sorry, but that's just a reality. It's a constant thing you have to work on. You can't sit there and say, in this house or in this business, we do, like, okay, but are you actually doing that when your staff is Black, brown, and indigenous and says something? Are you deflecting and saying you're the problem for being too aggressive? Or are you sitting with that discomfort and being like, hey, maybe I did cause some harm there?